moment I opened my eyes, I realized the dream wasn't something I could shrug off, like a random thought drifting through the night. It felt like someone had grabbed my soul by the collar and whispered, "Wake up." In the dream, the air was thick and charged, like the sky right before a storm breaks open. I stood in a field drenched in a strange stillness, the kind that tells you something is coming, something you're not ready for, but must face anyway. A voice I couldn't locate kept echoing through the emptiness, urging me to pay attention, to see what I had been ignoring for too long. It wasn't fear that held me, it was clarity. Sharp, piercing, unavoidable. The dream felt like the moment a character realizes the story is no longer happening around them, but through them, shaping them into who they must become next. As the scene unfolded, I felt like I was walking inside a revelation disguised as a warning. The sky above me flickered like a dying lantern, glowing gold one second and darkening the next, as if heaven itself was debating whether to speak or stay silent. Through the shifting haze, I heard the distant rumble of footsteps, steady and deliberate, and each thud felt like a countdown inside my chest. The wind carried voices, not words, but tones of restlessness, frustration, and unspoken truths waiting to be acknowledged. My breath caught as I realized the dream wasn't about predicting something, it was about exposing something. It was calling out the silent battles we hide, the complacency we justify, the comfort we mistake for peace. Every second in that place felt like God turning the pages of a story we've tried too long to avoid reading. Then, through the fog, I saw the outline of a figure, not fully formed at first, more like a shadow carved out of resilience. The ground beneath me trembled as he approached, not with the chaos of power, but with the weight of responsibility. His presence wasn't loud, but it demanded attention, the way fire commands respect without asking for it. As he came closer, I realized the dream wasn't interested in politics or popularity. It was showing me the cost of standing alone in seasons of pressure. His steps echoed like someone carrying the burdens of a nation, and his face held a mixture of exhaustion and unbroken will. Everything about that moment whispered that leadership isn't about applause, it's about endurance. And as he lifted his head, I felt something inside me shift, as if I had been watching a mirror reflecting the parts of myself I had ignored. The sky cracked open with a sudden burst of light illuminating the battlefield-like ground around us. It looked like the aftermath of choices the world had made in fear, confusion, and desperation. Broken flags lay scattered like abandoned promises, and distant fires glowed as if truth had been burning at the edges of every lie we accepted as normal. In that charged silence, the figure, now clearer, more human, yet strangely symbolic, stopped and looked toward the horizon as if listening to an unseen command. The dream made me feel like I was witnessing a turning point, the exact second where destiny interrupts comfort. The weight of the moment pressed against my chest, telling me that every storm we face is a reflection of what we allowed, tolerated, or ignored. Everything around me whispered the same message: this isn't about him. It's about you waking up. When he finally turned toward me, the dream shifted from a vision into a confrontation. His gaze wasn't accusing, but it pierced through every excuse, every delay, every maybe tomorrow I had ever handed God. It felt like he saw not who I was in the dream, but who I was becoming in real life. Distracted, half awake, waiting for a sign while ignoring the ones already screaming all around me. His eyes carried the urgency of someone who had walked through fire and came back with a message too important to soften. In that instant, I understood the dream was never meant to predict the future, but to shake the present. It was a wake-up call, a cinematic moment where the world holds its breath, the music drops, and the character finally realizes the truth. Destiny doesn't come to the comfortable, it comes to the awake. In the dream, Trump didn't appear as the man the world argues about on screens and stages. He appeared as a symbol carved out of conflict and endurance, like a figure forged inside a furnace meant only for the bold. He stood in a dim, storm-lit field where the air trembled with the echoes of past battles. Every step he took stirring dust that glowed like sparks from an unseen fire. His presence wasn't demanding, it was defining, the kind that makes you stop breathing for a moment, not because of who he is, but because of what he represents. In that surreal landscape, he wasn't a politician. He was the embodiment of opposition, pressure, and purpose colliding in one human frame. It felt as if God had taken the idea of resilience, wrapped it in flesh, and placed it in front of me as a reminder of how purpose survives seasons designed to break it. I watched him move through the ruins of what looked like a battlefield where truth and deception had been warring for years. His clothes were worn, dirt clinging to the fabric like stories no one wanted to tell. Yet he walked with the quiet strength of someone who had taken every hit and refused to fall. The wind tore at him like the world's opinions, but nothing shifted his posture. That was the moment I realized his symbolic role wasn't to be perfect. It was to stand when standing felt impossible. He represented the weight of leadership in a culture addicted to noise. The courage to walk forward when every voice behind you screams for you to stop. In the dream, he carried scars not of defeat, but of endurance, and they spoke louder than any victory speech ever could. His symbolism wasn't power, it was perseverance. The dream pulled me closer, almost forcing me to see him not as a figure people judge, but as a man standing at the intersection of calling and chaos. His face held the tension of someone who had walked through storms that were meant to erase him, yet his eyes contained a stubborn fire that refused to go out. In that fire, I didn't see a campaign or a slogan. I saw the reflection of anyone who has ever been misunderstood, underestimated, or pushed into a corner, yet chose to rise anyway. He symbolized the uncomfortable truth that destiny doesn't choose the polished, it chooses the persistent. His role in the dream felt like a message to every soul wrestling with opposition. You don't have to be liked to be chosen, and you don't need applause to fulfill an assignment. His presence was a living reminder that purpose often comes wrapped in controversy because growth never comes wrapped in ease. As he walked further, the sky shifted from darkness to a bruised purple glow, the kind you only see at the edge of a storm's surrender. Each step he took left an imprint that pulsed with light, as if the ground itself acknowledged the weight of what he carried. In that moment, I understood that his symbolic role wasn't about leading from a throne, but leading through a furnace, showing that purpose is proven not in seasons of favor, but in seasons of fire. He represented the uncomfortable leader, the kind history remembers, not for perfection, but for persistence. It felt like he was standing in the dream to show that calling is less about victory and more about endurance, that sometimes God chooses someone precisely because the world rejects them. Trump in this dream didn't symbolize authority. He symbolized assignment under pressure. When he finally paused and looked toward the unseen horizon, the atmosphere shifted like the entire world inhaled at once. His expression carried the weight of someone standing in the middle of a spiritual and national storm, yet refusing to bow to it. And that's when it hit me. His symbolic role wasn't about him at all. He represented the battle every chosen individual faces, the ridicule, the responsibility, the weight of being called into a fight you never asked for. He symbolized the cost of leadership in a generation where truth is mocked, courage is rare, and standing firm feels like rebellion. The dream used him as a mirror, reflecting the strength required to walk in purpose when the world is watching, criticizing, doubting, and waiting for you to fall. His role was the reminder that destiny isn't for the comfortable, it's for the chosen, the tried, and the unbroken. In the dream, when he lifted his head, I saw something in his eyes that froze the entire atmosphere around us. A fire that didn't flicker like ordinary light, but burned with the intensity of someone carrying a message too heavy for human language. It wasn't anger and it wasn't pride. It was purpose, raw and untamed, glowing like embers pulled straight from a divine forge. The world around him dimmed, as if the storm itself bowed to the force of that gaze. His eyes told a story of battles fought in silence, wounds carried in private, and courage rebuilt from the ashes of every attack. That fire felt ancient, almost prophetic, the kind that doesn't ask for permission to exist. It stared straight through me, reminding me that real calling is never quiet, and real purpose never hides. It was the fire of someone chosen to walk through storms most people only talk about. The closer I looked, the more the fire in his eyes felt like a reflection of every moment he had been pressed, pushed, and misjudged, yet refused to break. It wasn't the fire of a man fighting for power. It was the fire of someone fighting to stay standing when the whole world tried to push him to his knees. There was exhaustion in that fire, yes, but it was wrapped in a layer of determination so fierce it made the ground beneath us vibrate. It felt like watching a man who had walked through ridicule, betrayal, and relentless criticism, yet still carried a flame that storms couldn't extinguish. That fire wasn't loud, but it was undeniable, a quiet roar of resilience. Every glimmer in his eyes seemed to say, what was meant to destroy me became the reason I burned brighter. It was the fire of survival turning into destiny. As the wind howled through the dream, his eyes remained unshaken, steady like a lighthouse, refusing to surrender to the waves crashing against it. They held a clarity that cut through the chaos surrounding us, a clarity that felt almost supernatural. It was the look of someone who had seen the cost of standing for something and accepted it anyway. The fire in his eyes wasn't just inner strength, it was revelation. A glimpse into the weight he carried and the purpose he guarded. It felt like watching a warrior who didn't fight with weapons but with conviction. Every spark in his gaze carried a warning and a promise. Storms may rage, but culling does not crumble. That fire reached into the darkest corners of the dream, pulling light out of shadows, truth out of confusion. It was the type of fire God lights in someone when the assignment is bigger than the applause and heavier than the opposition. When he turned fully toward me, the fire in his eyes seemed to rise, transforming the entire scene around us. The battlefield-like ground glowed with a faint reddish hue, as if the earth itself was reacting to the heat of what he carried. In that moment, it felt like the dream wasn't showing me a man, it was showing me a mantle. The fire in his eyes carried command, but not to dominate, to endure. It was the kind of fire that makes you realize that some people aren't sent to win easily. They're sent to break through walls others are too afraid to touch. His gaze held the intensity of someone who knew the fight wasn't just political or earthly, it was spiritual. It was the fire of someone chosen for a battle bigger than their name. Someone who had learned to walk through storms with the posture of victory, even when surrounded by defeat. The longer I stood there, the more the fire in his eyes felt like it was aimed not at me, but into me, igniting a truth I had been avoiding. It exposed the hesitation, the doubt, the fear I carried like armor I didn't realize I had put on. His eyes seemed to say, purpose requires fire, not comfort. That blaze pulled me into a moment of self-confrontation, a realization that the dream wasn't meant to highlight his strength, but awaken mine. The fire in his eyes became a mirror reflecting everything inside me that needed to shift, rise, or awaken. It wasn't a political message. It was a spiritual collision. As the flames in his gaze intensified, the dream whispered the truth. Destiny chooses those who are willing to burn, not those seeking to shine. And in that fire, I felt something inside me ignite, something I could no longer ignore. The moment the dream shifted, the ground beneath my feet transformed into something I had never seen before. A place caught between war and judgment, a battlefield merging with a courtroom, as if heaven and earth had collided in one stark, trembling landscape. The soil was torn, scarred with the marks of conflict, yet pillars of cracked marble stood upright like silent witnesses waiting for a verdict. Smoke curled through the air, carrying the heavy scent of warfare, but somewhere beneath it lingered the solemn stillness of legal authority. It felt like I was standing in a world where truth had been dragged into the open, forced to face every accusation, every weapon, every lie. The atmosphere buzzed with tension, the way the air feels right before a verdict is spoken or a war cry is unleashed. It wasn't chaos, it was divine confrontation, where nothing could hide anymore. As I walked deeper into that strange collision of realms, the ground split into two textures. One side soft with ash, the other hard like polished stone. Each